Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Cord Connects. It is my privilege to welcome you all here this evening. My name is Moshe Weitzberg. I'm a member of the Cord Board of Directors. I would like to welcome you to tonight's session. The topic of tonight's session is Mastermind Groups in Medical Education. Our speaker is Dr. Rob Rogers, a name that many of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with. Dr. Rogers is trained in both emergency medicine and internal medicine. He is a professor of emergency medicine at the University of Kentucky's Chandler Hospital in the Department of Emergency Medicine, an innovative medical educator on the cutting edge of creativity. He shares his knowledge on the monthly medical education MedUtopia podcast. Dr. Rogers co-founded the Teaching Institute and in 2014 created the teaching course at the University of Maryland. As a passionate medical education enthusiast, podcast evangelist, learning choreographer, and entrepreneur, Dr. Rogers works tirelessly to change the world of medical education by reinventing it. It is my privilege to introduce Dr. Rogers.
Hey folks, thanks for having me. This is one of those topics that is relatively new to me, and some of you probably know what a mastermind group is. Some of you probably have no clue what a mastermind group is. And to be honest, this is something that I sort of stumbled on about a year ago. I got interested in it. We'll go through some of the background of this, but I got kind of interested in it just based on reading business books and listening to podcasts. And I started to hear more and more about it. And then I started talking to Mike Jasandi and a few other people about it, and started talking about the applications of this to medical education. And then it became clear to me that this is a really, really untapped resource in medical education. If this is used appropriately and you follow some simple guidelines, and again, I'm very new to this, this is something that can take your career to the next level. And not only your medical education career, but other things as well. You can do mastermind groups for example, for fathers. I mean, there are mastermind groups for just a group of dads who want to be better fathers, and really what they discuss is just parenting. You can have mastermind groups for entrepreneurship, and pretty much any topic you can think of, there's probably a mastermind group for it. And we'll define what that is in a minute, but this is, again, to summarize, a really, really untapped thing in medical education, and I think you're going to be hearing a lot about it. And it's starting to grow. There's a recent article put out, which I'll mention here at the very end, highlighting the fact that this is a really great and useful form of professional development. How do I advance my slides here? They are not advancing. There we go. I did put together a blog post. This was about 2 months ago. I was at a conference in Chile with Mike Jasandi, and he and I were talking about mastermind groups, and I started to think about it over the ensuing couple of months, and I put together sort of a blog post just sort of summarizing what it is, how to form one, why you would want to be in a mastermind group. And so that's a resource that you folks can check out. It doesn't really get into sort of research and hardcore sort of academics. It's more like, what is it and how can you use it, but it's there. One of the things, and I'll talk about some mastermind groups that I've actually formed over the past couple of months to give you some reference. This is something everybody knows, and it's really, really true for mastermind groups, because the people that are in the group will really define how productive and how much fun you're going to have in that group. And we'll talk about numbers and how many people should be in a group here in just a second, but this is a great quote from Jim Rohn, and it's useful for mastermind groups, but it's also just useful for life, that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you're in a group of 10 people, let's say the topic is medical education, you should pick that group carefully and be careful what group you get into, because you're only going to be as good as that group. And by the way, please interrupt me as I go through this. If you've got questions, just interrupt me, just blurt it out. I don't want this to be just me looking at a bunch of slides. When you look at mentoring, and this is basically a mastermind group is a mentoring tool, if you want to look at it that way. Everybody listening to this call, basically everybody has a mentor, and it's usually, my mentor has been Alma Matu for years. When I was a resident, Alma was my attending. We all have mentors. They're great. And I'm definitely not suggesting to get rid of your mentors to do a mastermind group. So keep your mentors. So we all have mentors, people that have guided us, people who give us good advice, hopefully people who give us writing opportunities, speaking opportunities, people that we can bounce ideas off of. And so mastermind groups is kind of the same thing but very different, and it's taken it to the next level, so to speak. So you can have a single mentor. To get back to mentorship, you can have a single mentor. Here you can tell that Amal is, I don't have the bottom of the picture on there, so you can't. So Amal obviously is trying to read a 12 lead, which he knows a little bit about, and I'm trying to interrupt him. If you look at his face carefully, you'll see that he was a little bit annoyed. But he's been a great mentor, but he's a single mentor. He's one person, right? So lots of people have teams of mentors. You can have somebody at your institution. You can have several people at your institution. You can have them from different departments, different states, different countries. You can have people all over the world that mentor you in whatever aspect of life that you're looking for mentorship. And so when you talk about mentorship, you're talking usually about a single mentor or a handful of mentors for different things. And most of us have a couple of mentors. Some of us have more than a couple, and we have this team that we've sort of assembled to put ideas together. I've got probably 5 people that form a group of mentors that I can ask, business questions, I can ask medical education questions, and so forth. A different form of this, and this is related to education. I'll talk about your personal board of directors in a minute. This is a little bit different. This is a personal learning network. Most people have been following the ICE blog out of Canada, and this is not necessarily mentorship, but ultimately it does actually include a lot of mentorship and guidance. So this is a personal learning network, is essentially on social media the people that you follow, the people that you get your education from. Now these are people around the world. I won't mention most of their names, but these are friends of mine, people around the world, people, educators around the world, people I've spoken with at conferences, people who've given me advice on things. But it's very different than a mastermind group, because this is a sort of a virtual, nebulous kind of mentorship environment where there's not intentionally, there's no structure to this, but it is kind of like mentorship. Something you'll hear a lot being discussed recently is the concept of the personal board of directors. And Ali Raja, who's a friend of mine in Boston, I use him as an example, as someone who's on my personal board of directors. And essentially it's a group of people that you really look to for advice. It's a little bit different than your team of mentors, but very similar in many regards. But it's a group of people that essentially are your board of directors. So if you've got if you're in medical education, maybe you've got Amal Mattu or someone, maybe Mel Herbert or Swami or someone in your corner, and you've got someone who does something else, and you put together this team of people, which is I think a really great idea to help you with certain aspects of your life and sort of be your champion for that part of your life. So you can assemble that. It takes time to do it, but mastermind groups are a little bit different. Now, this is a website. This is a guy, his name's Cliff Ravenscraft. He lives in Northern Kentucky, and I came across his podcast. He's got a really interesting podcast that I'd recommend you take a listen to if you're interested in just being better at what you're doing, which most of us are. He's not a physician. This is not a medical education podcast. And so this guy used to be in the insurance industry, decided to get into podcasting. He's taught podcasting all over the world, and he has developed a mastermind group. Now, just to give you an idea about how crazy this stuff can get, mastermind groups sometimes are free and sometimes they're paid. Someone ultimately has to put together the group, coordinate the resources, do the schedule, assign books, assign readings, assign podcasts, sort of be the schedule or the organizer of the mastermind group. So this funny thing is, this guy does a mastermind group that is about, I think it's $1,000 a month, which is a lot of money. That is way beyond what I would be willing to pay for a mastermind group. There are mastermind groups that go as high as $5,000 a month, like professional entrepreneurship type of mastermind groups, where you've got Jeff Bezos. Like you've got like really, really big name people inside that mastermind group where you can get advice from people. Most of us don't have the money to do that, right? So, but you can go crazy with this. There are free mastermind groups, and then obviously way, way, way expensive mastermind groups. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that this is one of the first people I've seen online do some of the paid mastermind groups. Basically, like for people who know what this is, this will be a little bit of a review, but a mastermind group is essentially a group of people. It's great if that group can meet live, so at a Cord conference or ASAP or someplace. And to be effective, they probably should meet somewhere live at least once a year, maybe twice. It really depends. It's a nebulous definition. But essentially, they meet either once a week or every 2 weeks or once a month. There should be some predefined time interval. And they meet on Google Hangouts, Zoom, GoToMeeting, depends on what format you want to use. And you pick, and there's an art form to this, and we won't get into how to do it, but let's say you had 10 people who are interested in medical education, interested in being creative, innovative, wanting to change the world. Then you could get these 10 people together, and how you get them together is going to depend on what you want to accomplish. Do you want them to apply? Do you want to pick them? But you put these 10 people together, and then you would meet on one of these formats once, let's say once a month as an example, and then you talk about your topic for the mastermind group, which we'll get into in just a second. So really, it's just a group of people interested in a particular topic who are going to meet regularly and get advice from the group. And that's the key thing here is the group helps the other members of the group, and you grow as a collective mind, or a mastermind is where that phrase came from. If you look at this concept, though, this has been around forever. This is not a new thing. It's been given the name mastermind group relatively recently, but this goes back, in history. If you look at some of the pictures on this site, Benjamin Franklin, C.S. Lewis, J.R. Tolkien, Charles Williams, Theodore Roosevelt, and lots of famous people throughout history have belonged to these groups where they have these people who basically sit around a table for the most part. Obviously, they didn't have Google Hangouts back then, and they discuss the topic, whatever topic it is, and they meet regularly and they get advice from other people. And everybody's a player. Everybody gives advice. You can't sit back, and that's kind of the key thing with mastermind groups is it needs to be an active group. So if you've got 10 people and there's 1 or 2 people who never say anything, those people are not going to benefit from being in that mastermind group. So, but this goes back a long, long time. Here's Benjamin Franklin's group, picture from, you just Google it and find it, but he formed one of the most early described mastermind groups. And if you look at some of these mustaches, it's pretty interesting, but he put together this group. And so again, it's been around forever, and it's just been popularized recently in some of the business publications, business podcasts, and then most recently in medical education from an article that I'll mention here at the very end. But this goes back a long time, and it just kind of makes sense. You've got people who are interested, and for purposes of this, we're talking about medical education, but it could be research, it could be presentation design and delivery. You can get really specific with this. It could be on how to be a great speaker. It could be really anything, or it could just be a broad general category of how to be a better educator, how to be a better teacher, how to be a better learner. It could be any of those things. And you put together your group of people, and then you decide who's going to organize it and how you're going to meet and who's going to keep track of each of those meetings. This is not necessarily a high impact slide here, but I started, just to give you an example, a group of people in Lexington, Kentucky, this is a very new group that I started, but this is just people who are, dads on my kids' soccer team. These are neighbors. These are people who aren't in the medical profession, just to talk about entrepreneurship and how do you develop a business? How do you develop ideas? How do you balance this with your day job? So you can go crazy with ideas. Anything you can think of probably could be a mastermind group. I started a mastermind group called Disrupt, which is just about to get started. Just an idea. It's just started with an idea, like, why don't I get 10 medical educators from around the world who want to share ideas on how to be creative, innovative, and effective medical educators. So you just kind of think about what ideas, what things you're interested in. you could run with this and develop a group, or you could join a group that's already existing. So this is just on medical education. Another group that I do is on podcasting. Listen, if podcasting is your thing, then maybe you need to join or consider starting or consider joining a mastermind group related to podcasting. It doesn't have to be for medical education. It could just be to learn the technology, the equipment, and all of those things. And then one that I started just to show you how easy they are to start is one on which is a little bit controversial on people who potentially want to develop a business and maybe either develop a side gig or get out of medicine completely. But it's basically entrepreneurism for medical educators. And then just think about what you could do, though. Whatever your interest is, whatever your niche is in medical education, or what are you really passionate about, you could start one, right? And you'll benefit from it as well. It's not like you have to sit back and not contribute. You can start one yourself, get people who are involved in that aspect of your life that you're interested in. Again, it could be anything. And then you reap the benefits. You get to organize it, and you also get the benefits of being in the group. So you can start one, or you can join one that's already there, and I can help you at least get started with maybe trying to find some that might be out there that would interest you. But there's a ton of ways to get involved in this. I'll talk about the benefits in a second. The benefits are tremendous. The benefits are a lot greater than I ever imagined. It sounds like a lot of work, like you have to meet every 2 weeks, you have to meet once a month, but the benefits are exponential development. It's crazy how much you can get out of this. So there's tons of reasons to go. There's tons of reasons to do this. You can accomplish your goals faster, brainstorming, support. I'll talk about in a second. The networking is tremendous. Just imagine that you are facing something in your career related to teaching or education that you can't accomplish, or you're having trouble doing, or you really want to nail something and get it done, but you don't know how to get started, or you don't know how to finish. And then you're in this group of people who have all these ideas, and everybody comes to the table. Sometimes that's a virtual table, but they all come to the table with their own background, their own experiences, their own failures, their own successes. And then you get advice from 9 other people who've been there, people who maybe haven't been there. They say, hey, I've been through this before. You might want to check out this website, or you might want to read this book on this topic, and maybe you've never heard of that book. The point is, everybody brings their own background into these mastermind groups, and the support and the networking you get out of this is invaluable. It's crazy how this thing, when it starts to develop and it starts to grow like it should, everybody benefits from this much more than just one group. Again, it's exponential power of mastermind group networking. There's a site you can go to, it's free, which is a pretty popular thing, free, where you can sort of pick who's going to be in your mastermind group. Let's say you've got 10 medical educators you want to put in your group, and you just list them on the website. And then you can see here from the slide that the website actually records for you, keeps track of your meeting, times it, and you can even keep track of records within the site. It's free. I have no affiliation with this website. It's just kind of a cool, slick program to do it. But again, you'll see these things starting to pop up because mastermind groups are starting to take off a little bit. Now, as far as members of the group, again, you can start one of these groups yourself. It's not difficult. I can give you some advice on how to do it, or you can join a group, but the group is going to be key. And if you're putting together one of these groups, you really need to think about who's in that group. You don't want someone who's got no experience whatsoever with the topic, and you definitely don't want to have someone that doesn't belong there to begin with, like Bill Gates. Bill Gates does not belong in a medical education technology mastermind group. Well, maybe he does, but I don't think he does. So you want to make sure that the group is selected and that they're interested and invested in growing from the content that you're going to talk about. And if you're developing this group yourself, you're going to be in charge of taking in applications and sort of talking to people and figuring out, is this the right group for you? And if it doesn't work, then they can leave the group and you can bring in someone else. That happens very frequently. Again, it's a living, breathing thing. But putting the group together is important because you want people who are going to contribute. You want people who will benefit. You want positive people, obviously. and you want people who are going to stay on top of things, who are going to get some assignments done. They're going to get the readings done, because a lot of these groups involve reading. One of the most recent books we read was gosh, I'm forgetting, Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, as an example. That might come up during one of the mastermind group meetings, that we're talking about social media and how to get things done, and then someone raises the possibility of, hey, maybe we should read this book. So just keep in mind, you need people who are reliable. And again, the key thing here is they're going to contribute, and they're going to be positive members of the group, because you may have to get rid of somebody in your group if it's not working out too well. This is a big mastermind group. This is not my group, but it's a group of people who, and personally, I think this is too large. This is a lot of people. There's no real science on how many people, what's the best number for a mastermind group, but certainly somewhere around 4 to 10. This probably has too many people in it, because each of these people are going to need to chime in, and they're going to need to listen. They're going to have headphones. You can imagine all of the technology glitches simply just increase as you have more and more people on your call, and that's going to happen. But this is a lot of people. Somewhere around 7 to 10 is probably the sweet spot. Anytime you go beyond 10, it's just going to be harder and harder to coordinate, because each of these people on the Zoom call, the Google Hangout, whatever format you're using, they're going to need their turn to go through their thoughts and talk about the assignments and stuff like that. So just kind of keep that in mind. As far as what you talk about during these meetings is interesting, and it depends on what kind of type of mastermind group you belong to. The key thing here is there's the concept of the hot seat, and the best way to phrase it is you've got 10 people. Each of those 10 people have things they want to accomplish, things they want to do, things they're having trouble with, things they can't get their head around. And each week or each meeting, someone is on the hot seat, so to speak. It's called the hot seat. And you talk about your problems, the things that you can't get done, your frustrations, resources that you don't have, whatever it is. But basically, everyone focuses on you. And everyone takes a turn and goes around and talks about your problem and gives you advice on that problem. So if someone says, hey, you should check out this podcast or this book or something, then your assignment is to go check out those things. So basically you're just sitting there taking in advice from all of these people who are invested in you doing better. And then the next time you sort of review what happened, and then the next person goes onto the hot seat. So essentially it's an invested group of your own board of directors, so to speak, and they're giving you advice, and it's for the most part, it's free. And then that sort of, it's kind of like the feeling you get in the phone world or the social media world in medical education, where you really kind of feel like people really want you to do better. They really, their heart's in the right place. If you develop the right kind of group, this group really starts to grow on you, because everybody in the group wants you to do better, and you want everybody to do better. And you start throwing out advice, and then you start reading a bit more and looking into other people's problems for them. And then all of a sudden, this mastermind group for medical educators, which is what we're really talking about here, starts to take on a life form of its own. And it's, again, mentorship is great. Board of directors is great. All of those things we've talked about are great. But getting into a mastermind group, if you talk to some of the academic life and EM people, they rave about this and its ability to develop its own life form and really project your career and push it down the road. It's incredibly useful. Here's a structure that I use on two of mine, and it's pretty simple. I mean, we're on a video call right now, and you have a welcome. You talk about the previous week. Hey, who can I pick on right here? Mike Gisandi. Mike was on the hot seat last week and talked about his, I don't know, inability to use PowerPoint. I'm picking on Mike, but then people talk about it. You can review what happened on the last call, and then the next person gets to sit on the hot seat after you talk about a couple of updates. And then you talk about your goals for the next week. You can talk about assignments. If it's a monthly mastermind group, like, hey, we should read this book, or here's a great article on mastermind groups we should be reading, or check out this blog post. Everybody gets the assignment, and then you can talk about it on the next call, review it. And again, you want to develop a group that is invested in this topic and really wants to be there. And if you do that, if you develop it the right way, it turns into a really, really powerful mentoring tool for medical educators. The key thing is a couple of key things. One is you need an organizer. You need someone to keep track of everything, who's been on the hot seat, what was discussed, what books were mentioned, what podcasts were mentioned, and someone needs to sort of run this thing, so to speak. The other thing, and this is probably the most important, is everybody in the group needs to be a player. Everybody has to contribute to this. You can't be a wallflower. If someone is not, first of all, it's not fair to that person because they're not going to get anything from it, but they're also not helping the group. You want everybody in this group to help each other, to be team players, and you're not going to develop that cohesive, dynamic life form if you've got people not contributing. So you have to have players for mastermind groups. This article just came out recently, I believe. It's been pushed out on social media. Glenn and a bunch of other people who are a lot smarter than me put this out, and I can send you the link, but it's out there for free as a PDF. This is the sort of the academic look about on mastermind groups and what academic life and EM has done with them. It's great. It's a great article. But basically, I don't know that you need a bunch of science behind mastermind groups. This is just, this has been around for hundreds of years. People have touted the benefits of mastermind groups for decades. And if you talk to people who are in a group and or they've just joined a group, 99.9% of the time they'll tell you how wonderful a tool this is. I just learned, they've been around forever, and I just learned about these about a year ago, so I don't know where I've been. But I didn't learn about these in residency. I didn't learn about these as a junior faculty member, and I kind of wish I had dug into this a bit earlier. People have been doing this for a long time, but right now is the time to develop some skill with this. Right now is the time for medical educators to develop groups, get into groups, because my recommendation for people listening to this, and I know this is going to be recorded, is the benefits you will get out of this are you just can't fathom. I can't even really describe it, because the groups start to take on a life form that you really didn't predict. And it's based all on how you form that mastermind group. I would recommend everybody read this article. It's a great review, and just more supporting evidence for the fact that this is something we probably should be doing as a form of mentorship. You could be really creative with this. You could form it for residents, students, junior faculty, senior faculty, could be non-medical topics. Again, I know people who are in this for just how to be a better parent, and that's what they talk about in their mastermind groups. So it's a really, really powerful professional development tool, a really powerful life and career tool. And I promise if you just try it, you'll be amazed at what you'll get out of it. There's a bunch of books out there, and they're not, some of them are good and some of them are a little bit cheesy. I don't get any money from these. Probably the best book I've seen written on this topic is the one in the middle, the Mastermind Blueprint. It's I don't know, $5 on Kindle. I think it's only a Kindle book that you can find on Amazon. It essentially, and you have to be a little careful, or sometimes very careful with some of the titles of these books, like Mastermind Your Business, The Complete Guide to Starting a Mastermind Group. Some of these are again very business oriented because that's where they originated. But as far as just having a richer life and growing and learning things you never would have imagined, and really developing skills that you never would have imagined, mastermind groups, I really think that's where the money is. And this middle book, I would get it and read it. It'll change your mind if you're skeptical about the ability of a mastermind group to change your life. So for medical education, again, just to, I guess, kind of summarize a little bit of this, for medical education, you can take this anywhere you like. If you're interested in a certain topic, start a group, start a mastermind group, put people together. It's amazing what you'll get out of this. If there's any questions, I'm happy to entertain any questions. I'm a relative newbie to this, so I may not have all of the answers, but if I don't, I'm happy to take any emails and get back to you with answers. I'm happy to share how I started groups and some of the pearls and some of the pitfalls.
There's one question in the chat. How do you go about picking your group? Do you invite people? Do you pick people that might be a reach? So I guess people outside of your scope. It's by Jenna. Jenna, you could also unmute your phone and ask the question if I didn't read that correctly.
Yeah, so Jenna, thanks for your question. This is probably the most important thing you'll do is get your group together. The nuts and bolts about how to run your meetings, the nuts and bolts about topics and assignments, and that stuff will develop naturally, and it's quite easy. There's tons of resources, but who you get in your group is the most important thing. There's a million ways to do it. And it kind of depends on what kind of topic you're looking to develop. One of the easiest ways to do it is to put it out on social media, which is what I did for the Disrupt Medical Education Creativity Group. You know, I just put it out there, hey, if you're interested in being creative and innovative in education, you might want to consider this free group. And I got 30 replies that day. So social media is an easy way to get stuff out to people who are interested. Just keep in mind, there's a lot of people not on social media. Can't believe it, but there are. So social media is not the panacea for getting your message out. You can start locally at your institution, sending out emails to different departments. I'm happy to go back and forth with you via email after this and help you, give you some suggestions on how to do it. But word of mouth is probably the best way. Talking about it at CORD conferences, ASEP, blasting it on social media, emailing groups that you belong to. But it all depends on what kind of group you're looking for. If you're looking for medical education, then obviously going to the CORD meeting and networking with people there is an easy way to get people into your group. But it just kind of depends on what your topic is.
So there are two more questions. This one's by Taryn. Can you discuss any recent topics Disrupt has reviewed?
Well, that's quite easy because we haven't reviewed any. I just got my group of people together. So, but that's the beauty of it, right? So we could talk about anything. I'll have a better answer for you in about a month. And if you're interested in joining the group, we've got room. So just email me. But right now, it's very fresh. In fact, so fresh I can't really even answer this question. How's that?
That's pretty good. There's one more question by Diane. Have you ever asked someone to leave the group? How did you handle that?
Well, again, these 4 groups that I'm doing are new, so that hasn't happened yet. But based on human nature, it could happen, obviously. And I would just have a one-on-one discussion. Usually from people I've talked to who've had to ask people to leave their group. The book that I'm showing in the middle by Aaron Walker, he is a brilliant speaker. I think he's from Tennessee. He's on tons and tons of podcasts, interviewing, and I forget if I think of it, I'll let you know the name of the podcast, but he talks about, someone actually asked him that question on a podcast, how do you get people to leave? And he simply says he has a discussion with them and says, you appear that you're not contributing. You don't appear to be interested. It can be tough I'm assuming it could be tough to ask someone to leave a mastermind group, but usually, according to people who've had to do this in their groups, it's generally someone who's not speaking up. They're just not playing. They're just not in the group, and it's usually obvious pretty early on. But I would just have a discussion with them and say, what do you want to get out of this? How do you think things are going? And have a little feedback session. I have talked to a few people who had people that were rude, believe it or not, in these groups, and they were just kicked out quite early. So I'm assuming anything could happen in these groups. But when you look at the fact that we're talking medical education for the most part and things like that, I can't imagine you're going to have many rude people who you have to kick out of your group. But there might not be a good fit, right? So they may not have expectations, or maybe they don't know what to expect out of the group. And I think that's pretty important when you put together a group, is laying the foundation, typing up a description, goals, and objectives for what this group will actually talk about. What are you going to spend your time talking about? What's the overall or overarching theme of this, so that people really know what they're getting into? Sometimes the reason they're not not doing well in the group is it's probably a group they don't need to be in anyway, because they really didn't know what was going to be discussed. So laying that out early, and I can send you copies of how to write those objectives and stuff, but laying out your objectives, designing the topic really well, and then careful recruiting, which is a little bit of an art form, is probably the most important thing.
We have one more question. It's from Michelle. She says, how can CORD facilitate putting together a mastermind group or mastermind group?
Well, so it's easy, I think, but I guess it depends on what kind of mastermind group. And as I sit here and think about CORD, there could be, I mean, there's so many different aspects of medical education. There's research and teaching and service, and there's different topics. So it depends on how many groups you'd want to do, because again, they can't be too large. You know, once you get over 10, it just becomes cumbersome, and it just gets. I know one group that's got 30 or 40 people in it, and I don't know how they do it. That's 30 faces on Google Hangout or Zoom, and as you know, when someone speaks, the rest of the screen goes to that person, and so you get some technical issues sometimes. So I would imagine one of the best ways to do this would be to develop some common core themes within CORD, using CORD as the example. What are some common themes that would I guess give you enough things to talk about? So faculty development for junior faculty. That's an easy one. There would be definitely more than 10 people who'd want to join, but you could have several. Just pure faculty development for people who are right out of residency. What can they do to write better and speak better and get involved and just grow as an educator? You could have one on research. I mean, you could divide these things up into different subtopics, and maybe you have multiple mastermind groups for faculty development. One, several for junior faculty, maybe a couple for mid-level, maybe one or two for advanced. But I think you just have to lay out what topic you really want to cover and decide if it's got enough energy to be its own mastermind group, or it should be incorporated into a larger mastermind group. I think defining what you want to talk about, if it's if the topic is too narrow, you might run out of things to talk about really quickly. I mean, you're not going to have a mastermind group on how to program your your DVD player or something like this simple, like we're after 2 sessions or maybe 5, you're done talking about it. It's something that has the potential to grow and develop and morph into different things. So the topic has to be big enough. But I think just defining different areas and then finding faculty members. I think the key though is you need a leader. You need someone who can lead this, someone who's invested in it, because without a leader, without an organizer, without someone staying on top of this, email reminders, it's going to fall apart. It can't be administrative staff running this, so to speak. It's so much work that it needs to be someone who is passionate about that topic. For example, how to read a 12-lead ECG in emergency medicine. Amal Mattu would be the perfect person to run a mastermind group on that topic. So you need someone who's passionate about the topic, because that's going to drive them to make that group as good as humanly possible.
So I'm going to chime in here.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Okay, so I think perhaps the role that CORD could play here is to be a forum to help people find each other with common interests. For example, if we put something either on our website or on CORD communities saying, if you're interested in forming a mastermind group on a certain topic in medical education, here's where you can go, where you can elicit if there is interest from other people. Here's your sounding board or your recruitment base, where you can see other people who share the common interest that you do and are interested in joining a mastermind group. And then the people can sort of form it on their own, but CORD can be the facilitator in helping people find the right team to help them achieve their goals.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about, that's exactly what it's about, achieving their goals and finding the right group. Yep.
The follow-up question, which Moshe, you pretty much answered, was so maybe new PDs as an example.
Yeah, I think that's a great topic. Yeah, I mean, think about, first of all, you would never run out of material to talk about, right? How to be a good program director. I mean, there's so many things that could go wrong. There's so many things you have to know. There's so many, I mean, there's so much to talk about that to me, that's a natural topic for a mastermind group, how to be a good program director. And I mean, you would have a lot of people. I would imagine you would have a lot of people interested in being in part of one of those groups. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, Rob, longtime fan, first time caller.
Ditto.
I'm always, I hate to be a negative Nancy, but I'm interested in conflict, and I realize that you're just getting into this. But you know, how do people manage conflict in these groups because some of these groups will be a little bit amorphous. So for instance, I'm beginning to work in a mastermind group around physician wellness. So we're talking about some research. We're talking about possibly creating some didactic stuff or some conference material. So I'm interested in how, when you have a group that's sort of collectively steering the bus,
Mm-hmm.
how do you deal with conflict? And then, of course, the far extension of that is, you know, how do you deal with somebody who's just not pulling their weight? And I guess that question was sort of addressed before. But you know, conflict resolution, conflict management is always tough, and I imagine would be especially tough in a group without any hierarchical structure.
Yeah, and that's the key, non-hierarchical structure. I mean, you're in the group together, and to be honest, people I've talked to I've talked to a few people in the business world who have done this, and one in the medical education area, and it seems to be a common theme that the reason to have an organizer, an invested, passionate organizer of it, and not just someone, you know, who's given this, like, hey, Chris, can you run this mastermind group on, you know, podiatry emergencies, and you're not invested in that. And so when you're invested in it, it's like running a small group, so to speak, where you really don't know or can't predict what's going to happen with a group of medical students. Maybe one's going to dominate the discussion, maybe one's going to be really quiet. Part of the skill, and I think it's a skill set, some of it carries over, but some of it's going to develop as you go along, because you are doing this virtually for the most part on video formats. How do you virtually do a small group? Basically, you have to kind of monitor how your group is doing, if someone's speaking too much, if someone's not speaking enough. I don't know enough about it yet, and I don't think a lot of people know the answer to how you handle people who are, first of all, if someone's quiet, you may just have to have a private conversation with them about their goal. Is your group meeting their needs, basically, and are they in it for the right reason? And I'm huge into social media, texting. That stuff's great. This is a phone call. This is like you pick up a phone, you talk to the person who's not, for whatever reason in the group, too quiet, not contributing, and you have an adult, normal phone conversation about, is this the right thing for you? If you've got someone who's dominating or, quite frankly, saying things that are inappropriate, I think it's a similar thing. I've talked to a few people. Their recommendation is just pick up a phone, call these people, or meet with them one-on-one in person, and try to understand if the needs are being met on both parts. I think you can prevent probably a lot of this stuff by laying out really, I don't want to say detailed, but at least easy to understand goals and objectives. Maybe it's just one goal, one objective, but what is the purpose of this group? And if you're letting someone, but what's going to happen is inevitably there's going to be someone or a few people in this group that you don't know, right? That you may not know them, and you don't know their personality types. You don't know if they've got good emotional or social intelligence. And so it is, it's kind of like the box of chocolates. You really don't know what you're going to get some of the time, but I think you've just got to carefully monitor, the interactions. I haven't really heard any horror stories of things that have happened, but I'm assuming they could happen if the wrong person gets in these groups. But I think as a leader and someone who's invested in leading a group and making sure the group grows as an organism, you're going to be in charge of, you're going to have to utilize your people skills to talk to these people one-on-one about sort of keeping them in check. And sometimes those people may have to be removed from the group, to be honest.
Thanks. I just have one other thing to say about Cord's role in this. You know, part of my job for this year is to make sure that our members and, well, specifically our representatives of the member programs are getting the resources they need. If people listening to this podcast, either live or once it goes up on the website, feel like masterminds might be helpful or mastermind groups might be helpful and Cord can provide a resource in organizing that, then just email me or this is Chris Doty, or you can email Tina, and we'll create a community for this where I think our community platform would be really great for storing this up. So if you're interested in a mastermind on medical education or being a better program director or innovative conference solutions or engaging learners, then you can just send an email to that community, and then anybody that's interested in masterminds can go through that community and pick the emails they're interested in, and essentially create a clearinghouse for people that are interested in these various things. And I think our new communities platform would do that sort of very, very well. And I can make that happen, or who's really going to make it happen is Tina. So just email us and we'll get that going.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer questions, help as much as I can if people have simple or complicated questions about how to do this. I'm by no means an expert, but I'm happy to try to help.
A tremendous thank you to our speaker, Dr. Rob Rogers. Thank you
my
all
pleasure.
for joining. Thank you, and thank you all for joining us. Our next Cord Connect session will be on August 23rd. The topic is the flipped classroom. I look forward to seeing all of you there. Have a wonderful evening.
Take care. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.